Hi, storytellers, and welcome back to the Storyteller Shelf podcast. It's Jackie again here with Teresa, and we have another massively incredible guest here with us today. We have Kwame, who is a New York Times bestselling author, recipient of the Coretta Scott King Award, and he's also the publisher of an imprint at Disney-Hyperion called Freedom Fire, dedicated to stories about the Black experience by Black creators. We are so honored to have him on today, so let's just jump right into it and have him tell us a little more about himself.
I mean, my standard answer is that I feel like I've always been writing. And to a certain extent, that's true. Pretty much since I learned how to write, I have been writing. I felt like too many words inside of my skull. I would get in trouble in class. I was a great student, and this isn't me bragging or anything, but I didn't get in trouble for like causing a disturbance. I got in trouble because I would daydream and I would just make up stories in my head and go off on complete side plots, full plots, romantic interest, multi-day adventures. I would come back, I'd start the daydream on Monday, and by Wednesday, it had branched off into, this is what my ancestors were doing that led to this point, or my future descendants carried on the torch of this battle. Just full on epic, multi-generational daydream. That's what I would get in trouble for. And so it got to a point where the stories would be too big for my head, and I just had to get them out. And they weren't always full-fledged stories. And something I like, you'll hear this a lot. Something that I like telling to young writers or aspiring writers is that um, sometimes you won't know that your story isn't a story until you start writing it. And you'll start writing it down and you'll realize, so I don't have like much of a plot. I had an idea and a cool character, and that does not a story make. And so I have many unfinished from throughout the years. My mother still mails me notebooks from our house that she's found, like, hey, I found maybe you could do something with this. And I'll look at it. I was like, this is so fun. And I'll start tinkering with it. And then I realized, like, no, it wasn't meant to be a story. It was meant uh, for me to just practice writing. And sometimes writing just to write is perfectly acceptable as well. Nobody needs to see everything that you write. Nobody wants to see everything that you write. Some things should stay hidden in desk drawers and Google Documents.
You are the first person, I think, other than Teresa and I, that has mentioned that on air, because Teresa and I both, we have we have come together as one and said, "Yeah, we both have way too many Google Docs just full of words and stories and not stories, and we don't wanna share them with anyone. They're not going to query anywhere. They're just kinda hanging out where they are forever frozen in that place, or go back to a tinker with," right? How did that writing journey look? You had these daydreams, you wrote some stuff down. When did you start thinking about going the professional route with this?
Well, let me think. I started pursuing being a published writer, a professional writer, a writer who earns money. Um, Probably I was well into my like scientific career. I've been writing just for fun, for passion, but probably maybe 2014, 2013, 20, somewhere around that time. So a little over 10 years ago, I was in my 30s. I was in my 30s and was like, let me investigate how to get an agent, what this publishing process entails. I was and still am a big fan of short stories. So I was like, let me start writing more short stories, submitting them, getting rejections, figuring things out. Um, and I feel like I always say I feel like I failed my way upwards. And I think that's what writing is. Writing is failing your way upwards, failing until you're successful, which is probably everything. You're bad until you're good, or you're bad until someone, pays you, even though you're still bad. Um, but for me, I investigated, what does it take to get an agent? Well, first thing is you need a story. You need a completed manuscript. What? Why? That wasn't part of the deal. So yeah, I started thinking about, well, what could turn into a full length book project. Started one, got, to the magic 10,000 word number and scrapped it because it was like, I'm struggling. I don't see a future for this. Started another one. And that became the book that got me an agent. And this is like 2015 or so, 2015, 2016. And I wrote The Floating Library of Timbuktu. It's, where is it? I have it in a binder somewhere around here. Because I printed it out because it's my first completed book. It was terrible and wonderful at the same time. It was a West African steampunk, and it had all sorts of history and fantasy and wonder inside of it. But I don't know if it was ready to be a story read by others. However, it was enough of a premise, it was enough of a glimpse into the stories that I could tell that it landed me my first agent. And from then on, it was the try fail cycle, try fail, eventually succeed. Um, and that's what led me to meet, Danielle Clayton and Cake Literary and what would eventually turn into Tristan Strong.
Yes, and Tristan Strong, I know for my family, that is one of our favorites, and when we think of Tristan Strong, that was a huge breakout success and still is. I mean, it's very talked about. Can you share the story behind the writing it, how that idea came to you, and how long it took it to come to life?
Yeah, I mean, Tristan Strong wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Danielle Clayton, who, first approached me about like, hey man, you should really write this story about um our folklore as gods. Write this new um literary canon, if you will. And because that's really what all folklore is. Folklore becomes legend, but it starts as a story that someone decides to tell, right? And so we decided to tell a story that brought characters like John Henry and Anansi together, characters like Gum Baby, um, characters like the people who could fly, Burr Rabbit, all of them together into this world, this shared world, combining the African diaspora of storytelling and threading the story of a boy who's dealing with grief through it. And it was ambitious, I think, because I tell people all the time, I was terrified that something like this would not get published again to the magnitude that it was being supported, right? So you have Rick Riordan backing it on his new imprint. You have Disney backing it that the imprint is with. Um, and it's getting all of this marketing, all this publicity, all this press. You have, Barnes and Noble wanting to move it up to before the holidays so that it could be a holiday, it could be supported throughout the major buying season. Um, and meanwhile, I'm writing this and I'm like, yo, yeah, I gotta put this in. We gotta put that in. This is a middle grade book, and we're over 100,000 words with it. And I remember my fantastic editors, Stephanie Lurie, telling me like, I wanted to cut and edit this, but I didn't know what to take out, And I was like, well, thank you. It's mildly terrifying. I write books that are too long. They're way too long. Um, and so, yes, it was a breakout success and it was incredible, fantastic. It was terrifying, because this is my first book, debut novel. Um, and as I'm writing all of these, I feel like I put a lot of personal grief situations in there. I was dealing with grief at the time. My children were dealing with grief at the time. Tristan is dealing with grief. Um, all of the folk characters are dealing with grief. The gods are dealing with grief because of all of these terrible things that have happened throughout the book. And it was an interesting way to navigate that as you're moving through the same emotion yourself, putting your character and they're them taking a completely different path through it. So writing Tristan was well, writing every book is a novel, pun intended, experience. But writing Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky and the subsequent novels in the trilogy and the Gum Baby short story and the graphic novel adaptation was, I think, an incredible thrust into the world of storytelling, and I think really defined the type of storyteller that I am.
Yes, I think, like, we can all say we very much appreciate the beautiful storytelling that you have and you have shared with the world. I think it's so amazing. Can't say stress that enough because it's so good. Um, what but I wanna kind of move into more of the writing process. Um, what is your process like? I mean, every writer has their own process, their own way of doing it, whether they're a pacer, a plotter, if you have your cup of tea, if you have your coffee. What do you do when a new idea won't leave you alone?
What is my process? Mike Tyson has a famous quote that's, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I have slightly adapted that to say that everyone has a process until they become a parent. And then process goes out the window and it becomes, I need to write when I have the opportunity. I am recording this podcast right now because I have strategically aligned myself with my rising kindergartners allotted hour of tablet time, right? And so we're on a strict time budget right now. I just turned in a draft for my latest middle grade trilogy. I just turned in a chapter for a co-written companion novel that I'm writing. Um, and so like my contracted writing is done. And yet I still feel like there's so many stories that are like scrambling to get out of me. And so you mentioned like, when a new idea won't leave me alone, I have what's called story stubs. I should really trademark that or patent it or something. I call them story stubs. And basically what it is you have a comp. Let's use Tristan, I think Kwame Alexander called it like a middle grade American Gods. So you have a comp, you have a 2 or 3 sentence like pitch or summary, a boy who's dealing with grief, um, accidentally punches his way into a world where West African gods and African American folk heroes exist and they exist in conflict. And he has to find a way to bridge that conflict in order to find his way back home. Right. So you have a summary. And then if you still have like something to build with after that, like you still have creative material to work with, I start writing chapter one, right? And chapter one gives me it's a bellwether as to whether or not I have the complete makings of a stories right now, if I need to put it on the back burner and let it percolate for a little bit. So I start off with that complete, you know, um, pitch, summary, chapter one, and then maybe a synopsis, like I call it a skinny synopsis. A lot of writers hate writing synopses. I love them. I love them so much because I am a nervous bundle of anxiety. And if I don't know what's happening, like, I'm not a plotter. I am not a plotter. I don't, you know, sketch out subplots or character growth arcs or anything like that, but I need to know that I know what I'm doing, because otherwise I am just going to lay on the floor in the dark, because that is how I deal with anxiety, right? So for me, it I treat every idea that comes to me as if it could be the idea. And that means a story stub. A story stub takes like 5 minutes, right? Um, and then I've gotten it out of my head, and it's there ready to be expanded upon. It is a scaffold that I can build upon later in the future, a year from now, a month from now, or tomorrow if I need to. Um, but I like the idea of a story stub because it doesn't restrict you from playing around with that shiny new idea. Even if you're on deadline for something else, that number fluctuates on any given day depending on who has my tablet and they're using it for what. MacBook, iPad, pen and paper. My mother who is also a writer, would write her snippets on sticky notes, and then Saturday morning she would get up early and collate them. And I've adopted that habit as well. I have half-filled notebooks. I've got Pilot Precise V5s, 0.5 ballpoint pens, on the standby, ready to write whatever I need to. Because you never know when an idea is going to hit you. I've got Google Docs on my phone, Scrivener on my phone, all of it synced up in the cloud. There's no process. It is a beautifully chaotic nebula of ideas that sometimes coalesce into some form of chapter related thingy. And that is Kwame's writing schedule.
You need to patent the writing subs, and it should just be called Kwame's writing subs, and that's it. Like, no one else can take it. That's yours. That's amazing. Um, I think I want to pivot though into I'm fascinated by your degree in science and how you use that in your writing. Um, so you have a background in science. Has your training as a pharmaceutical meteorologist influenced your storytelling in any way?
Has my training influenced my storytelling? Yes, but probably not in the way that you're thinking. I would love to tell us. I would love to tell a science-backed story, or a story revolving around science, a story that integrates biology or chemistry or any other natural science. I think it would be fascinating. I've just haven't gotten around to doing it. However, science is it is a field of evidence, right? You need evidence to back up, because what is crucial about science is that your results are repeatable, meaning someone else using the same materials that you use can recreate what you did. And so you need to have that backing, that sound backing. And for me, that comes from research. So I think my science career prepared me for the research process of storytelling. Every story that I've written, fantastical or not, has a healthy amount of history or world history embedded in it. Whether it's, Tristan Strong trilogy and the Mid-Atlantic slave trade, whether it's The Last Skate of the Emperor duology and the history of Ethiopia, um, whether it's Jax Freeman trilogy and stories of the Great Migration, or Hulu, or just the general Black American lived experience. There's a lot of research that goes into it. Some of it doesn't go into it, but it's still useful for me. Um, I live on JSTOR. One of the greatest things JSTOR ever did was allowed you to read 100 free articles a month. I have yet to hit 100. That is my goal. It is my goal to fully consume my allotted 100 free articles on JSTOR, because I live on there. I'm constantly looking for research articles, studies, just peer-reviewed evidence, or scholarly literature on these things or topics that may or may not make it into the book. I am such a nerd. I am a Wikipedia, YouTube, Google nerd. Not in the fact that I use those for research, but it's that trap, that rabbit hole where you find one thing and then it links to something else, and all of a sudden you have six, new things that you can discover and research. Like that spider web, that branching, fractaling spider web of information to a tiny little nerd like me is I would fully be trapped by a witch in the forest if, instead of cans of candy, they like dropped Wikipedia articles. I'm like, oh, num 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 num. What is this? The history of sword fighting? Oh, that's delicious. Num, num, num. Oh wow, metalworking in Africa, in a sub-Saharan continent. Num 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 num. This is delicious. Why am I in prison? What's happening here? Can I at least have a light for this new information that I'm reading? Um, so it's research for me is pivotal, and that comes from just my science background, wanting to know what I'm talking about and wanting the readers to believe I'm an expert, even though I'm clearly not. But I want to appear to be knowledgeable so that they then become interested in the subject matter, and then dive off. One of my favorite things is when I'm reading something and I'm like, I think it happened to, I think it was the fifth season by Nora K. Jemisin. I was reading that book and she just used a term in there. I said, "Oh, that's a pretty cool term." And then, like months after I had finished the book, I was reading on one of my Wikipedia binges something, and I realized that she had incorporated an actual scientific term into her fantasy and used it like correctly the way that it was intended, just with a magical, context. And I was like, "Oh, that's so brilliant! The links, neurons, dendrites are firing in my head. My brain is no wrinkles." That's the that's what I love about reading. And so I want to provide that to readers. And that's where the science background comes into play.
I like the idea of the witch in the forest. I too would be trapped. Jackie will back me up on this because I am also a history buff and fact nerd. I'll go down the rabbit hole and I'll share that same kind of thing with my husband. I'll start off on one thing that I'm researching. I don't know if you do this as well, but then you go off on another, and I can definitely empathize with you. I too would be trapped based on the facts thing.
I would totally be captured. It's terrible. Just they would just look at my browser history, like, oh, he just likes to learn about everything. So let's just just a little bit of information here and there. Did you know? I did not know. Please tell me more about this as you lure me into this gloomy forest.
I think knowledge is our weakness. We'll promise not to share that too much, just in case your enemies are listening. I have to brag though. Between us, I got to 85 articles on JSTOR in 1 month, and I was super proud, but it wasn't all for me. I was helping other people research, so I can only claim half of the success there.
well, July is almost over. So my goal for August will be I'm going to reach 100 scholarly articles on JSTOR. I'm going to read them. I'll be able to summarize them. I'm going to have proof. I'm going to take notes. It's like I'm going to be back in class.
I'm looking forward to it. You have to tell us when you hit 100. And I have to say, so Teresa's husband is an engineer, and then I have a science background as well. So I feel like we're in really good company. And sometimes we also get the same question that we ask, which is, does science help you write? Does being exposed to somebody who studies or practices science help you write fiction? And everybody has a different yes. And I loved your yes because research is so important. It's what makes worlds come alive. And we talk a lot about middle grade readers in particular. They are so smart. They pick up everything. Kids know when the universe you're creating is built on solid bones and when you've created your own plot hole and made, illogical basis for what you're talking about. So I feel like you really need the research in there to buff up what you're doing.
I want to do for Kidlit what Alastair Reynolds does for adults. Alastair is he has a PhD in astronomy, and he, was an astrophysicist who is now a full-time writer. I just finished like his novella. I guess this is a novella, Permafrost, yesterday, and I'm like, oh, this is entirely so believable. None of it is going to happen, but it could, and I want to do that for kids to make them, oh, this is absolutely. I'm learning so much. I need to go learn more voluntarily.
Learn more voluntarily. We love that phrase. All right, let me take a step for a second. So we've spoken about how you write and how you got into writing and some successes that you've had writing, which have been many. So looking back from where you're standing now, what was it that surprised you the most when you got into this world of official publishing?
What surprised me the most about getting into publishing? I'll give you two answers. One is, I mean, they're both kind of related. One is when you've had some success, it it unfortunately or fortunately, it opens so many more doors, more than just merit alone, right? Which, hey, I reap the benefit of when I say my second answer, but also it's like, I understand that there are millions of people out there who want to become writers, and I wish that it wasn't the case that who you know or who you are would will help you more in the long run. And again, that's not every case, but I mean, it's happened to me, it's happened to others. And so that's always, um, the person standing on the back of the chariot, if I'm Caesar, whispering like, this too shall pass, like you're only relevant for as long as you're relevant. However, I will say, to bring some levity back, is how many free books I get. Like, again, I'm a reader before I'm a writer. And so used to be, they changed a little bit, with COVID and quarantine and switching from physical mail to like, NetGalley or PDFs or whatever. But it used to be like I would be like, oh, I'm going to go to a conference, and they would send me like the books of everyone who was going to be on the panel. And this is my first, debut. It's my debut novel, so I don't have any other experience other than this. I'm like, they're just sending me books. Like I'm the biggest, like I'm a nerd. Like I would read everything when I was younger. I just, well, I'm going to go to a party. I want to read. Let me read. Total side note, this new thing of like book parties where you all hang out for a little bit and then you read your book. Wonderful. Blow my mind as a child. I can go somewhere and just read and still be social. Like this introvert nerd guy would have been in heaven. But yeah, just the number of books I get, whether it's some of them like, hey, can you blurb this? Some of them like, hey, can you read this? Some of them from friends, some of them just out of the blue. Can we give you a copy? We'd love to send you this. It's amazing. And yes, I totally reap that benefit of having some success in the industry. Yes, send me books because I will read them. I have a household full of readers. We will read them together. Picture books, I will read those with my kindergartner. Graphic novels, I'll read those with my 10-year-old. My oldest, we will read YA novels together. So, all the free books, wonderful. I love it. Absolutely. Reveling in my privilege there.
We love free books too, and we Teresa and I are fortunate as well that we get them for different reasons. And by the way, we have to plug in for listeners. If you are that person who's new and who's nervous about asking people for blurbs for your book, please shelve the timid nervousness for a second and just reach out, because a lot of writers and authors and people working in publishing, we love to read, and usually we're very happy to give you that blurb. Ah. We'll take it back to the dark note for a second, because I have to agree with what you said, because this is part of the reason that Teresa and I started this podcast. Was we understand the back scenes of publishing. It is a business at the end of the day. And sometimes we like to say it can feel a little like politics, that you have to know someone who knows someone or have XYZ that makes you marketable. And that does play a huge factor into whether or not you get published as an author or an illustrator. But that doesn't mean that there are no opportunities at all. So we started this so that there's equity and knowledge and opportunities for people like our listeners to meet people and to hear these stories of what can happen and the different ways that you can make it happen. So I'm glad that you said that, because again, that just really resonates with what we do and why we do what we're doing now. And we don't want that to be a gate kept secret, right? The reality is the reality, and everybody deserves to know it, because once you know, you have the power to start making steps so that you can say, okay, let's mastermind around this and let's get to where I want to be. It's the empowerment behind it. So, another pillar of why Teresa and I started the Storyteller Shelf is that diversity and representation in books. Hugely important to us, and that's from our personal backgrounds. Teresa's family is part Mexican, my family is Puerto Rican, and we know that finding books with characters like you and your family, oh my gosh, so hard, even today, that we've made a lot of progress. So we wanted to ask you, as someone who's existed in this world and who is an advocate for Black stories, tell us a little bit more from your perspective.
Um, how are we doing in terms of representation? It is miles better than when I started as a writer, which in turn is miles better than where I was as a reader growing up. Um, but the finish line is still like halfway across the globe, right? You can have progress. I used to cite this study from Lee and Low Books. They would do their diversity and publication, I want to say, survey every so often. I remember, and this is maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I need to double check to see if they've come up with a more recent survey. But at the time, I remember reading, and it was like the number of books by people of color, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, it had doubled within, the past 3 or 4 years or so. And then they listed the percentage, and it was still like single digit percentage of the total published books, right? So there was progress. You doubled, but it was still nowhere near, the journey hadn't been completed yet, right? Um, and so there's still a ways to go. But like I said, it has become a lot better, right? But that doesn't mean the job is finished. Just from, I have my own imprint with Disney, Freedom Fire, the imprint that Rick Riordan started, Rick Riordan Presents, like all of these different opportunities. And let's face it, publishing is a copycat industry. So if something has success, they want to jump on it, right? And it's revelatory. It is stupendous, and it is mind blowing every time a marginalized author's book becomes successful. And it's like all of a sudden we're rediscovering that everybody else has purchasing power as well and will support. So we've come a long way, and we still have a long way to go, right? um but I do feel good that my kids get to grow up at a time when um there is an actual measurable increase in diversity on the bookshelves. Not the bookshelves that I create, but the ones that they go out and curate or explore for themselves. So for me, you know, uh, I feel like I had an opposite experience from a lot of different, marginalized authors, where they'll say that, and this is their lived experience, and it's absolutely true, that they grew up and they didn't see themselves, right? I was the complete opposite, and that is because my parents were intentional about the bookshelves in our house. They stacked the 4 bookshelves outside of our in the common room, in our family room, with Coretta Scott King, author winners, picture books. They would get by self-published and indie press books. They would go to African and African American fairs and the vendors, and would buy books from them. So we had books on our shelves. And I thought that's how the world was, truly, until I got out into the world for myself and started exploring and realizing that no, that wasn't the case. And so I feel like my kids' bookshelves match the bookshelves that I grew up with for totally different reasons. And that reason is that things have gotten better, but it's still a fight. It is still a fight. We're only in like round 0.1. We still have to go the full 12 rounds before we can consider ourselves winners.
That was a really beautiful answer. Thank you. We know it's not an easy question, and we like to tell you our answer is always the same again every time, which is we're on the staircase and we're a couple stairs in, but we're definitely not at the top yet. Uh, but we take the journey as it comes, and we see so many diverse creators and initiatives. So we're here to support that. Um,
I want to just say, this is a totally new analogy. Springing it on you this is my first time using it. And I really hope I pronounce the city right. I want to say it is called Chong. Oh, please help me pronounce it right. It is Chongqing in southwestern China. And if I'm not mistaken, it's the city like with all of the stairs, where like you'll have roads that are, you think you're at the bottom and you're not. You're still super, super high up. I love just watching the TikTok videos of the guys. They'll be like, all right, today we're gonna go, to work or whatever. And they're just going upstairs, and it's up and up, and they just go up and up and up. And then it's like, we're on the ground level of this building, but now we got to go up, and now we're on the ground level of this building. And it's like 5 minutes of them climbing stairs, and they've gone so far, right? And then you realize, oh no, you look around the corner and there are more stairs to climb. That's how I feel like, increasing diversity in publishing is like, we've come so far, we've worked so hard, my legs are so tired, and there's still more to go, but we cannot like stop. uh, 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 we can't like forget what we've accomplished because we have accomplished a lot. Never forget that we've accomplished a lot. We just still have more to go.
And for people listening in, it's Leanne Lowe's Diversity Baseline Survey is the name of that. And the last one they published, I think might have been in 2023. Definitely check it out. So interesting. It's full of need to know knowledge and it talks about not just creators, but it also talks about people working in publishing. So please get those stats. And let's talk now, kind of going off of this thread. We want to talk about A Hero Looks Like You because you are working with Disney and Marvel, which you continue to work with Disney today. And people on the other end, oh, we can imagine ourselves in that position, but what does it feel like working with such a big company? Did you feel nervous at all? Did you feel intimidated? Was it an experience like you expected? How did it go?
I mean, working with Marvel was a blast. It was fun, and I think it's all attributed. I had two great editors, Wendy and John, and couple that with the fact that I'm writing a picture book. And so not necessarily like a comic series or graphic novel that will, enter or alter the canon of anything. So like a lot of the keyboard warriors just, put their pitchforks down and just glared at me rather than causing a fracas. But which is that how you pronounce it? Fracas? Is the S silent? Because I heard it pronounced for the first time, and I've been calling it a fracas for the longest time. Is it not fracas? Is it a fracas? Like, have I been completely like I'm the reader pronunciation. I read things so often, then I say them out loud, and it's like intensive porpoises, right? Like everything is just wrong. Is it? I'm gonna let you all
Is
correct.
it Frankus? I don't know. I'm guessing.
There's a third way.
I bet Teresa's about to tell us a fourth. We have to Google this. This is important knowledge. Let's see. Guys, I have no idea actually. It's coming up with 4 different pronunciations. Okay, well, creator's choice.
Okay.
User's choice.
For when our listeners are watching this, let us know in the comments about how to pronounce this word. But is it a French
I've
word?
always
Is it a French word? I don't know.
it is yes.
Okay.
From fracasse or fracasser or no, I guess it's French, but it was originally Italian, fracasser, to make an uproar. These are the dovetails that I go off on where I'm like, I heard something pronounced for the first time, and that is completely the antithesis of what I have been saying in my head, and I need to make sure that I'm right because this is very, very, very important to me because, reading Kwame doesn't like to be wrong, whatever. Um, Regardless, working with Marvel, on this picture book was probably the best, experience that anyone could have had. It's not like I had a quick comic book deadline turnover. And it was my first picture book. So John and Wendy were wonderful. And, like I said, I write long and that's not what you do for picture books. And so there's an economy of words that you have to strike a balance between and telling the story. Um, and so it was fun. Funnily enough, which one did I get finished with first? I want to say that I had been working with um Star Wars as well at the same time. So I sort of had an experience with working with someone else's licensed IP, what you can and what you can't do. And so, there wasn't like the typical, um, frustration like, oh, I can't do this. They said I can't do this. Because I think for me, I worked very generically and then refined as the edits happened, as revisions happened, meaning I would make the story very, a soldier did this, right? Um, and then we would come back and we're like, okay, well, we have these characters, we could put them into the book. And I'd be like, all right, so instead of a soldier, it's now Serpent did this, right? And so instead of Marvel telling me what I couldn't do, they told me what I was allowed to do. And we were further able to refine and narrow down and become more specific in our storytelling. So I think it worked out really well.
While we're on the subject, would you tell us a little bit more about the Star Wars novel and the Star Wars novel comes out in October, right?
It comes out. Yes, I have 2 books releasing in October. So I have the book 2 in the Jax Freeman series, and then 2 weeks later, I have The Last Order, which is the Star Wars young adult novel, that focuses on Finn and Janna, and their early years as stormtroopers. It's sort of a dual timeline, but it's, listen, I love Star Wars. One of my like earliest memories I can think of is in seeing the poster on the wall in Blockbuster Video, those iconic posters, and just being like, "What is that?" And then catching the marathons on like TNT or TBS over the holidays, renting them from Blockbuster Video. Seeing when the prequel trilogy came out, um, all the way up until the moment I saw Finn lurch up from the sand in the episode 7, preview trailers. And I'm like, we have a black stormtrooper. Instantly, I was like, what is this? What's happening? And then the trailer for episode 9, there's another black stormtrooper. What's happening? I need to know more. Right. Um, but all of this, I like to say that this novel came about because I manifested a tweet. I tweeted, I think it was when episode 9 was coming out, and I think maybe Esquire or one of the magazines did a big cover shoot, photo shoot with them, and there was Finn and Janna, and I was like, I'd love to do a YA novel with Finn and Janna exploring their backgrounds as stormtroopers and blah, 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 blah. So I tweeted that out before episode 9 had come out. And so when we talked with Star Wars, the people at Star Wars or Lucasfilm, and Disney about doing a novel, I immediately pulled up that tweet and they were like, yes, immediately, yes, let's do it. I was like, yes, this is why you tweet things at midnight. And that's what it became. And I had, again, so much fun playing with this idea of stormtroopers not as villains, but stormtroopers as humans who are doing what they're told, and becoming slowly becoming aware of what happens, of consequences and their impact, and just also having fun, like the dynamic, the camaraderie, um, teaming up with a rival and then realizing that you have more in common, um, standing up for what you believe in. Like I had a blast. I had a blast writing it, and I hope people have a blast reading it as well.
Everyone who comes on the show, we go through the metaphorical exercise of if you had a t-shirt, what would the phrase be? And I think your t-shirt phrase might be, "This is why you tweet at midnight."
There's so many. We could do, that. We could do the witch would get me if she dangled news article. There's a lot. We could put a lot on the chart.
Can you tell us about Freedom Fire, your imprint in collaboration with Disney Books, and what is its mission and why did you want to launch it?
So it's funny. I just put out a story on Instagram because my iPhone prompted up a memory. It was like 4 years ago, because around this time, 4 years ago, myself, Jason Reynolds, Georgian Johnson, Jerry Craft, and Tochi Onyebuchi, we flew up to New York to do a piece for our upcoming anthology, Black Boy Joy. And so we filmed that. And Freedom Fire, for a lot of different reasons, feels like almost a spiritual successor to what we intended to happen with Black Boy Joy, which is this idea of storytelling that celebrates the Black diaspora, with joy as its core tenet, its core pillar, right? Exploring ideas. That doesn't mean like you have to write a happy story, but your story should center, moving towards resilience and joy. Even if you don't reach it yet, you're striving for it and you're making an effort to get there, right? Because above all, we want to show young people how they can navigate themselves from any situation towards a place where they are comfortable with themselves, happy with themselves, content in their surroundings, and striving for something even better, right? And so that's what Freedom Fire is, and it's part of its mission. We're in year 2, um, which is exciting. But it's never about the current year. It's about what's happening in the future. And the talks that we've been having, the books that we have been acquiring, the artists, the authors that we have been working with, it's just like, you know, the future looks so promising, right? And so for me, it's like I've always been, and I think a lot of readers are like this, right? When we find out that you like to read too, well, we want to share books with you. We want to talk, what books do you like? Do you like this book? This is a book that I like. And I like shouting about books, right? And so that's why I have my newsletter, Black by Popular Demand. That's what I would tweet about, or, put a story about on my social feeds. It's books that I've read, books that I'm currently reading. And now that Freedom Fire, and for all intents and purposes, is just me being able to shout about books that I feel like you all should be reading, because there's so many incredible authors and stories out there throughout the world. And I just want to highlight some from the African diaspora, and let you all revel in them, experience them, learn from them, celebrate with them. Something I said about Black Boy Joy that I feel like is also pertinent with Freedom Fire is that these things that we're sharing, these stories that we're sharing, this is like someone else's birthday party, right? Like, I go through this all the time with my kindergartner, that it's not about you. This birthday is not about you. But you know what? You're gonna go. It's a splash party. You're gonna have fun. They're gonna feed you pizza. You're gonna get a cupcake. You're gonna get a goodie bag to go home with. You're gonna have a great time. And it was all about someone else, not you. And you still had fun. And that's what reading these books and sharing these books, whether it's Freedom Fire, Black Boy Joy, or just someone that doesn't share the same lived experience with you, it is you celebrating them and enjoying the story that they're telling.
That's awesome. I really appreciate the importance of storytelling, and the fact that this is something that it's year 2, but it's growing, and the fact that you just want to share good stories. And that's the most important thing. I think that's fantastic. Um, for our audience of aspiring authors and illustrators, how can they keep an eye out for opportunities to work with Freedom Fire or get involved?
I am the easiest person to get in contact with. My DMs are never closed, for good or for bad. But um, I, for every 9 pieces of harassment, I get one request for mentorship or conversation, and that makes it all worth it. Or my website. I am perpetually online, which is probably not a great thing, and I shouldn't be admitting that. But it is so easy to get in contact with me, and through there, getting in contact with our incredible Freedom Fire team, our editors, and all of our everyone behind the scenes who make these books a reality. Um, Reach out to me. That's how probably the last 3 meetings have happened. I've seen someone, and I'd be like, listen, we need to talk, right? So don't be afraid if I slide into your DMs, because I will do it. I'm also very respectful when I do so. I come laden with cat pictures or hobgoblin pictures, depending on which version of the cats you get. But I come with bearing gifts, and salutations. I have a calendar of dad jokes that I can drop in there just to let you know that I am a friendly guy. And then I will ask you about, like, what are your aspirations about writing? And have you ever thought about writing middle grade? But it is so easy to get in contact with me. I check my website. I check my submissions form all the time. So don't be afraid to reach out. I'm a very, very friendly guy, unless I'm reading a book, and then don't talk to me.
And you kind of gave us the perfect ending note. So thank you so much for being here with us today. Thanks for being so honest and so easy to talk to.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you inviting me on.
If you enjoyed this episode, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and share this with a friend, because we know that other people out there could use this too. And one last thing, if you like freebies, definitely join us in our email newsletter. Pop your email in, it's for free. We don't spam you, but we occasionally send things like career opportunities, awards and contests, and handy dandy things like pitch guides and query guides that you might find very useful. So otherwise, we will let you go today, and we'll see you again next time.
This episode of the Storyteller Chef podcast is brought to you by Harney & Sons Fine Teas, a perfect companion to every story. Whether you're reading, writing, or just enjoying a quiet moment to yourself, Harney & Sons offers a beautiful selection of teas to elevate this experience. From classic blends to unique finds, every cup is crafted with care, just like the stories we love to share. Shop harney.com/discount/storyteller, and storyteller is in all caps. Now let's get back to the show.